Right, a perennial question here. How much money, or how much can I make from plantation Manuka? By the way, that's just a view of our seedlings which are growing in our Rakau nursery up in Auckland. This was taken back in February. I was there on Monday to collect the seedlings which are you can see here. I've got 3 varieties of them, but that will be covered at a later workshop. I'll just pinpoint them to you. The extent to which you can make money from Manuka is largely dependent on how well you are able to manage the manageable risks, and then there are unmanageable risks, which you have little control or ability to manage. And I'll cover that in just a moment. But the combination of those two will determine how profitable your Manuka honey industry business is and how sustainable it is. So let's look and see what are those manageable and unmanageable risks. The manageable risks are the quality of plants that you put in the ground, the planning of your plantation, management of that plantation once you've actually planted those seedlings, the planning of the apiary and management of that, and the health of your bees. Okay? Now all of those risks there are covered by one or more of our workshops today. And then there are the unmanageable risks. The weather, activity on your neighboring properties. That's manageable to the extent on how well you get along with your neighbors and how well you can negotiate with them. But that is a big factor. Because they can put beehives there, they can spray the plants on their property, etc., and that will impact you if you've got your plants and beehives on your side. There are regulations which come in, impacted that are largely government controlled, and of course there are market prices. So let's just recognize the manageable and unmanageable risks. Now, the financial model which we've used does not assume a plant and forget strategy. So people who call up and say, "Can I get some seedlings off you?" and I say, "Well, what for? Can you just tell me?" and they say, "I want to have Manuka honey," and we'll just plant them in the expectation that somehow down the track they'll get high-grade Manuka, is a bit of a misconception, and that's why we have taken the approach that we have, which I'll explain in a moment. The financial model assumes continued Manuka farming New Zealand involvement from the time you first establish your plants or your plantation, right through to the harvesting of the honey, full harvesting of the honey, which takes place in year 6 or 7. Which is why we have the confidence to put in are higher than average expectations in our model, or higher than average values in our model. So we've talked about the manageable risks, and those manageable risks, the expertise that we have through our science program and through the knowledge and experience of our co-investors, helps us through the program that we work in with our clients impact the variables or the values that are input into our financial model. And I'll go through each of these variables in a moment. But I'll just actually stop here for a moment and just ask if there are any questions or I need to backtrack in any way. Yeah, okay. So let's look at those variables. Plantation size, that's a key factor. The larger your plantation size, the more options you have to self-contain your bees. In other words, having the bees within your site and not foraging into other neighboring properties. And that's a very important aspect, because in light of some of what's happening in the industry today, where we've got boundary riding, which in other words, beehives being put close to your boundary, so that by other beekeepers, and in other words, poaching on the flowers that you have or the plants that you have on your is an issue. So the larger the piece of land, the better you can manage that risk. The larger the piece of land, sorry,
what would you recommend as a minimum plantation size then?
Well, in exceptional circumstances, probably say about 20 hectares. Exceptional being where that 20 hectares is quite well protected by, it may be by certain, let's say, conservation land or water or something like that, whereby, you know, the ability to forage is and
No pastoral farming.
yeah, that's right, that's right. Yep, 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 yep. But preferably, you know, we've, as other speakers would say, you know, 30 hectares and above. Okay, but certainly the larger your size, the more options you have. What you also have with a larger plantation size is the opportunity to maximize the monoflorality of your Manuka. In other words, to limit the what should I say? I'll use the word contamination of non-Manuka flowers or plants. Okay. The hives per hectare is another key variable. Now, more hives don't mean more honey, and they certainly don't necessarily mean more better quality honey. But it's used as a proxy measure for this model because that's what's used in the industry anyway. So let's keep that standard. So we've got that there. Just as a general background, wild Manuka, there's generally about 1 hive per hectare. With plantation Manuka, you're probably looking at about 1 to 2 hives per hectare. Total honey production per hive, now that's a key variable. For your information, it's ranged from 24.2 kilograms in 2011 to 39.4 kilograms in 2013, and last year it was 29.1. So that just gives you about the range of I guess, yield per hive. Manuka honey as a percentage of total honey, well, you know, if we know that Manuka gives you the premium price, so of all the honey production that's produced in your land, not all of it will be Manuka, but you want to maximize the percentage of Manuka honey that's there. UMF value, the higher the value, the higher the price. The share of returns to landowner, this is obviously important if you're not doing your own beekeeping and are relying on a share of returns from the beekeeper. So that's a critical element. And lastly, the plantation side. If you're eligible for AGS Afforestation Grant Scheme funding, then you put an application and if you're successful, you'd get up to about $1,300 per hectare for that. So that makes quite a significant difference. So those are the key variables, and I'm now going to start to plug in some numbers that will start to bring this to life. But any questions?
Just with the afforestation grants,
Yes.
it has to be on sort of highly erodible land for it to qualify as well.
Not necessarily highly erodible. No, there's the next.
With an erosion risk.
Yes, yeah. Well, the main aim of that is actually to increase plantation of forests. Okay. The next session actually talks about that in much greater detail. So what are the key assumptions behind the financial modeling? Well, we assume an establishment cost of $2,539 per hectare, which is made up of, if we break it down in dollar terms, 985 would be seedling costs, 840 would be planting, post-planting care, if you like, 487, site preparation, this is establishment cost per hectare, site preparation 213, and we've built in a ongoing sort of consultancy with us of $15 per hectare. So the establishment cost would be about $2,539 per hectare without AGS funding. If you are successful in getting AGS funding, reduce that by $1,300 and you get $1,239 per hectare. Okay? We also assume an ongoing cost of $62 per hectare from year 3 to year 6 and dropping to $47 per hectare from year 7 to 20. The other key assumptions behind the modeling is that the full maturity of Manuka plants take place from year 7, with the number of hives gradually on that piece of land gradually increasing as the plants get more mature. We assume a cost of 85 cents per seedling. For us, that's our cost if ordered before 30th of June, and it excludes financing costs and business operating costs, which are fairly unique to each business. Let's look at the variables here. So in this case, I've assumed a plantation size of 100, hives per hectare of 1.5, total honey production per hive of 40, Manuka honey as a percentage of total honey 80%, which gives you 4,800 kilograms of Manuka honey a year, a UMF value of 15. Now I said before, the higher the value, the higher the price, and that just gives you, this here table just gives you an idea of the difference in value or price that you'd get for the different values of Manuka. So this one here, we've assumed a UMF 15, which gives you about $72. If you got up to UMF 20, that almost doubles to $130 per kilogram. Okay. Share of returns to the landowner from the beekeeper is 30%, and 90% of what you apply for in AGS funding is what you're successful in getting. So this is the projected cumulative net cash flow forecast over a 20-year period based on those values that are provided. I'll just bring your attention to a couple of things. The black bar chart there is the returns if you weren't receiving AGS funding, and the blue ones are what you would if you did. Now you will see here that in the first 7 years you'll be still in the red. Okay, you wouldn't have broken even at that point, but from about year 7, year 8, again depending on whether you've got AGS funding, you start to get a return there. Okay, at the end of a 20-year period, your accumulated net cash inflow would have been $1,317,000. Okay. The next slide actually just goes on a per hectare basis and then makes comparison with other types of farming.
I'm just curious what you assumed with the carbon.
Oh no, I have not made any provision for carbon credits or anything like that. Okay.
So you didn't go for the grant, you could get carbon revenue.
Yes, that's right. If you didn't go, because if you got the AGS funding, your carbon credits for the first 10 years you wouldn't be eligible for it. Okay. Now we can go back to any of these slides, but I'll just run through the slides with you. So that's on a 100 hectare piece of land over a 20-year period. If we start breaking it down to on a hectare basis, we'd start to from about year 7, year 8, stabilize about $1,032 per hectare. The red line here is what your accumulated cash flow per hectare is over a 20-year period. So by the year 20, you would have accumulated $13,176 per hectare. Okay.
Sorry, is that
Yeah.
assuming that, is that the full cost, or is that just assuming the landowner takes 30%?
That assumes the landowner takes 30%.
That's 30%.
That's 30%, yeah. So for those landowners who choose to do their own beekeeping, which is certainly an option, then their return will be 100%. But of course they've got beekeeping expenses, etc., to take care of. Okay. But that's a number of our clients are going for doing their own beekeeping. So how do these financial returns compare to other land uses? So I've compared it, while I've compared it to dairy and sheep and beef I've made a distinction between intensive finishing farm as well as hard hill. One has to just keep in mind that just because comparisons are made, it doesn't mean that you can actually use the land for that purpose. Okay? But just so that it provides a bit of...
Say that again?
Yes, I'll say that again. So I've made a comparison here between those different land uses, but some of the land that you'd grow Manuka, you wouldn't actually use it for sheep and beef. It's just too not suitable. But just as so that we have some sort of perspective, I have made that comparison. So from this you can see we've got Manuka returning a profit of $1,032, and the revenue is nearly the same, which actually indicates a very high profit margin. You'd see that dairy, the profit is quite a lot higher, the revenue is quite a lot higher as well, but the costs are also quite a lot higher. Okay. With sheep and beef, again, it's 902 based on revenue, which is high, but quite a high cost component as well. So that's a comparison of the yearly earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation and amortization profits. So that's one perspective, and that is the returns per hectare at, if you like, at your peak point in time. But let's put things again, let's take an entire picture and say, well, that's fine. What's the returns over a period of 20 years? And you start, and this, so I'll just bring your attention to a couple of things. With all the other types of farming, you get a return almost from day one. So dairy, which is green, sheep and beef hard hill, you get a return from year one, if you like. Okay, so that's a plus. With Manuka, which is in the red, and there are two bars for Manuka, one is again AGS funding and one without AGS funding, you're actually in the red for the first 6 years. Okay, so obviously that's a key consideration, if indeed you had those other land use options. But over a 20-year period, we'll see that dairy provides the greatest return there. The sheep and beef on a finishing farm is 1.8 million. Manuka is 1.4, and sheep and beef on Hard Hill is 742,000. Okay. So that hopefully puts things in wider perspective. Any questions, thoughts there? Okay, so in conclusion, plantation Manuka is a financially viable option for non-productive land, or as an alternative to sheep and beef farming, but whether it's hard hill country and or intensive farming. And plus there are benefits with respect to erosion control and environmental impact as well. Okay. That concludes this short presentation on the financial returns.